and welcome to another video. So I have had many comments at the moment asking me if I could do a story time about some of my scary experiences living in a haunted house. Now, if you've come over from the main channel Explorer, you may have heard some of these stories before, and there is some people on this channel that don't watch the paranormal investigation, so you may never have heard these stories before. So if you don't know, my main channel Explorer is a paranormal channel where I travel all over England going to haunted locations doing paranormal investigations. And I was inspired to do this because my entire life I have been around haunted locations, I've been in haunted houses, I've done paranormal investigations since I was 15 years old, which, believe it or not, was 15 years ago. I know, you can't believe it, I'm 30, I am also shocked. And I think after I did the Krampus video for Christmas, a lot of you really enjoyed the sort of story time style video, and you've asked me to do another one, you've asked me about some experiences, so we're gonna get into it today. But before we do, make sure you like, you comment and subscribe, because as you know, it massively helps the channel and I also really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to take us way back in time to before I was even born. You're probably thinking, how can you have had a paranormal experience before you were born? And I'm about to tell you. Now this one is creepy. If you believe in reincarnation, that this may be the story for you. So as I said, this was before I was born, and my mum and my dad were driving down a country lane in Wales. And if you know Wales, a lot of the roads are in the middle of nowhere. They're all bendy, curvy, and there isn't normally that many people around, and this was one of those locations. At this point in time, my brother was alive. He has very sadly passed away, but this was when he was still with us and he was a baby. Now, my mum was driving, my brother Daniel was in the seat next to her, obviously in his baby chair, and my dad was sat in the back of the car. And as I said, they were going down all these squiggly lanes, and all of a sudden this really thick fog just dropped, and it was one of those fogs where you literally cannot see where you're going. My mum said this fog came out of nowhere and she could only see a few feet in front of her face. All of a sudden, my dad said he then looked to the side and he saw a little girl sat there in Victorian clothes, and all of a sudden she turned and looked at him and had a great big smile on her face, and my dad instantly just shouted, "Stop the car." Now, if he didn't say stop the car, they were about to drive into a brick wall. So this little creepy Victorian girl with a big grinning smile and curly hair actually saved them that day. And what's really weird is, as I grew up to look exactly like that little Victorian girl that was sat next to my dad that day in the car. I remember when I was a kid and my dad told me this, it well and truly freaked me out, but as I got up, I thought maybe that was me in a past life, somehow knowing that this was going to be my future family, and maybe I needed to be here for a reason, and that all happened because I needed to do whatever journey my spiritual journey is. So comment down below what you think about that. If you've had any experiences with like past life or anything similar, let us know in the comments down below. So we're gonna fast forward a little bit here to when I was actually born. So when I was born, we lived in a Victorian house that had 3 stories. It was very creepy, and it was actually the gatekeeper's house. It was really creepy, and it was actually a gatekeeper's house. So it had a lot of history, and when I tell you this place was creepy, it was creepy. So my mom remembers that it used to be on like a 6-month cycle where every 6 months she used to get like paranormal activity in this house, and then it would calm down and it would go away again, and then the activity would again start to pick up. And one of her favourite memories is this would happen, like I said, quite frequently, where in the kitchen things would just move like in front of your eyes. She said she was there one day and she saw the top of a teapot just start rattling by itself, and there was obviously no one there, and that would happen to her quite often. Another story from that house was when I was a baby, and when my mum was changing us when we were babies, the dogs weren't allowed in the living room. And there was one day she was changing, my nappy, whatever, and the dog went to walk into the room, and my mum was like, you can't come in here, you know, get out, you're not allowed in here while I'm dealing with the babies. Anyway, the dog still went to like walk in the room, and all of a sudden there was this pram behind in the hallway, and my mum saw the dog just like freeze with terror, and she watched with her eyes the pram reverse and then hit into the dog, and the dog just ran outside. And my mum like quickly like finished what she was doing and then went outside to check on the dog, and the dog was absolutely petrified, and my mum really had to try and make the dog calm again to get the dog back in the house. Also in this house there was like crazy things that happened where the dogs would just like stare with like terror constantly. The dogs would play with people that weren't there. It was a very, very active house. There was also a really scary thing that happened to my mum after I was born. She just got out of hospital from giving birth to me, and I believe she put me in the sink in the bathroom to like wash me or whatever, I don't know. And my mum was like facing this way towards the bath, and she felt someone come up behind her with 2 like hands and push her in the bath, and my mum landed in the bath. How scary is that? There's also another scary story of the same bathroom where we had a dog sitter stay to look after the animals because we had gone on holiday. And when we come back, he was freaking out, and he very, very confidently said he will never step foot in the house again. He will never look after the animals again. And that is because he went upstairs and he saw a deceased man lying in that bath. And it was for a split second, and then he was gone. But this man never come in the house ever again. There was also my older sister. She was staying to look after the dogs, and when it was time for her to go, she couldn't find her handbag anywhere, and she was like really strange, don't know where it is. Anyway, she went home, and it was a few days later we went up into the attic, and there was like stairs going up to the attic, and her handbag was there just like in the middle of the room, but she hadn't been up there. There was a door to close off the stairs to get there, and the dogs obviously couldn't have took it up, but it was just there. Another really creepy thing. There was also a cellar to this house which had been bricked in, and the rumour was that apparently something quite bad happened down there. I don't know how true that is. That was like the talk of the neighbourhood. As you can probably tell, a lot of stuff happened in this house. I also remember as a young kid, my sister used to wake me up because she could see a male spirit just like in the house, like just chilling. There was so many weird and creepy things in this house. But eventually we moved from that house to somewhere else, and the next house wasn't actually as haunted at all. I mainly had like, I suppose, nice experiences in this house. This was when I feel like I first connected with my spirit guide, and whenever I was feeling a little bit sad, I used to hear someone like singing to me. I know that might sound mad and I might sound like insane, but I swear I did, and I used to think it was like the fairies or the angels, but like hands down, like hand on heart, like that I used to hear this, and I don't know, it was so bizarre. But in that house, I can't remember anything else happening, to be fair. But then we moved again. So we moved again, and in this house, I had quite a few scary experiences. So I remember one day I was sat on the end of my bed where it was, and in front of me was like a dressing table. But I remember this day, I was just sat on the end of the bed, and I had like a hairbrush and whatnot on the dressing table, and I was sat on a pillow, and I remember, oh god, it was so strange. I remember it happened really quick. I felt really freaked out, and a pillow that I was sat on got pulled from under me, landed on the floor, and then a hairbrush that was on the dressing table fell on the floor, and then a photo of my dad and my brother fell over. And I was froze, I didn't move, and eventually I got the courage and I texted my mum and I was like, I'm really frightened, like come upstairs. And my mum was like, everything's okay, and I was really freaked out. And obviously, as I said, my brother sadly passed away when he was a baby, but also by this time my dad had also passed away, so I don't know if that was maybe one of them potentially letting me know in a really creepy way that they were there. I also had another really creepy thing that happened in this house. I remember at this point I started dabbling in like paranormal stuff and really like heavily looking into like witchcraft and stuff. And I remember one night I woke up on the floor, I don't know how this happened or whatever, and all the drawers in the room were like turned upside down, and like it was really creepy. And I like was waking up with like scratches on my body, and my mum said I was like really zoned out, and sounds really bizarre, but she got her friend to come over who said that there was some dark spiritual thing going on, and she did something, and apparently she hid something under my bed and it all stopped. But she actually was really unwell after that, because apparently it took a lot of energy to cleanse whatever it was that was in this house messing with me. But I've always known and always been told that I'm very open to spirit, as we do know, and I've had like crazy and creepy things happen my entire life. But I feel like I've now learned how to like shut myself off, because I was so open to it before, which got me in a lot of trouble, and I've learned how to protect myself, which I always go on about. It is so important. It was also in this house and all of this stuff was going on. I remember having a dream that I saw my brother at the age he would have been if he was alive, and I remember he was stood there and he literally just said to me, everything's gonna be okay. And that was the end of the dream. So I do feel like he was like almost like my guardian angel a little bit. I don't know, comment down below what you think. I know it's all absolutely like terrifying stuff, and legit they could actually be a horror movie on my life, because I've had some wild things happen. So after all this happened, we then moved house again. And I know you're probably thinking, what do you mean you moved house again? Well, we moved around a lot when I was growing up, and this next house, we actually moved out of a city that I grew up in. We moved into a town not too far away. And in this place, I probably had, well, no, I definitely did have some of the scariest experiences I think I've actually ever had to this day. And some of the stories I'm going to tell you now, oh, every time I tell them, my heart races. I feel like really like dizzy and scared, like it proper freaks me out. But I'm going to tell you because you've asked, and it's fine. So in this house, we moved in, and pretty much instantly I had a wild nightmare. And in this dream, I went into my mum's ensuite for some reason, and I opened the door in my dream, and stood in front of me on my stepdad's side of the bed was a girl stood there, and she had long black hair, and she was just stood like staring at me. Oh my god, horrendous, right? And in my dream, I slammed the door and I like dropped to the floor in absolute terror. And that was my dream, right? And I woke up and I told my mum the next day, and she was like, oh, don't worry, like it's fine. And literally years went by, never really thought about it again. Until a few years later, my mum and my stepdad had been to an antique centre, and they come home and they'd brought this really weird table. And when I say it was a pointless table, it literally was, right? About this big, a square, you know what I'm saying? The legs were this high. It was a tiny little table. There was no reason for them to buy this table. Nowhere for it to go. They just felt like they liked it and they wanted to buy this table. And anyway, they're like, oh, Lottie, come and see what we've brought. And I was like, oh God, what have they got now? Come downstairs, and I literally walked straight up to it, and I turned this table upside down, and I was like, I don't like this table, it shouldn't be in the house, right? You're probably thinking, what the hell? I don't know, but I instantly just turned the table upside down. I turned the table upside down, and under the table was wax drippings all over it. There was scratches, there was like puncture holes in the table with all these weird symbols and shapes, right? And it was just weird, and I was like, this has got horrendous vibes, like it needs to go. And this is where it gets really weird, right? So that night I could not sleep, and I had another weird dream that I was in an old horse and carriage, and I was with a monk, and we were driving through a forest, and we stopped at a clearing which was surrounded by all these trees, and I got out of the horse and carriage with the monk, and I pointed at a tree and I said, that's the symbol. And it was a symbol that was on the table. And the monk started panicking, going, no, 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 we've got to go, we've got to go, we've got to go now. And that was my dream. I woke up and I just had this really horrendous feeling like there was something dark just like watching, right? And it right freaked me out. Anyway, I managed to then get back to sleep, and I woke up in the morning. I go downstairs to make a coffee, and my mum comes down, and I remember thinking, whoa, you look like you've not slept. No offence, Mum. And I was like, oh, like, are you okay? Like, you know, everything all good? And she was like, no, like something really, really scary happened last night. And I was like, oh my God, like, what do you mean? I hadn't told you about my nightmare. And she said, oh God, it's horrible, right? She said she went to the toilet in the night. Oh God, it's so bad. She opened the door and she saw someone stood there with long black hair on the side of my stepdad, like the bed, right? And my mum saw this thing and she ran and she jumped under the duvet, and she, like literally in the movies, she put the duvet over her head and she just stayed like that like all night. And I was like, oh my Christ, this was my dream, but do you not remember the dream I had when we first moved into the house, right? I was like, this table and that dream, there's a link, there's something weird going on. So my mum phoned up her friend, the one that came to the previous house when I had all that weird, like, ghosty stuff happening. And she come over, and she's a white witch, that's how she refers to herself. She come around, looked at the table, and she said, get that out of this house now. She was like, there's something really bad attached to that table. Bad things have happened to do with that table. Get it out of the house now and have it facing away from your house. So we got it out of the house and we had it facing like away. And the next day my mum was like, right, we're going to get this and we're going to take it to the tip. We're going to get rid of it. Anyway, the next day we went to get it out of the shed, and it had turned itself back over facing the house. I can't even, it sounds insane. I know it sounds insane, but it all happened, right? Anyway, the table went to the tip, right? Looking back in hindsight, I wish that we had maybe not kept the table, but that we had donated the table to someone who could have like studied whatever was going on with the table. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like a medium or someone who does spiritual work to try and cleanse it or something, because I wish I could see it again. I know it sounds wild because it was so scary, but I'm just so intrigued because it was so wild. Like, is that not the most wildest thing you've ever heard? Like, it's so crazy. And also in this house was when I started dabbling with Ouija boards and whatnot. I had some crazy experiences, and the first time I did one, my mum was like, I know what you've done in this house, and she told me off, and I was really intrigued by the whole thing, and I just kept doing them with my friends coming over, which I shouldn't have done. And one time my mum went away for the night. I was maybe like 15. No, I would have been 16. I would have been 16 years old. And my friend came over. We made one literally out of scrap pieces of paper and laid it around the table. And I remember we lit all the lights, like the candles and whatnot, and the candles are flickering. It started working, and we were both like freaking out. And we were saying, like, who are you attracted to? Like, who are you, like, feeling a pull towards? And it kept coming over to me, and I was like, I'll never forget this. And I was like, why? And it said, we see. And I was like, well, how many people are waiting to speak to me? And I'll never forget, it said 27. It said 27 and we see. I don't know what that means, but anyway, we closed it down. Well, we thought we closed it down. And we put all these scrap pieces of paper in this little wooden box, and I kept it in my bedroom, right? And a few months later, that friend, she came over to stay the night. This is the scariest experience of my life, by the way. Just like legit the scariest of my life, right? Kept it in this little box in my bedroom. She came over to stay, and in my room, my bed was there. I was sat in a chair here. The drawers were here, and she was sat on the end of the bed here. I hope that makes sense. So I leant down and I got the box and said, oh my God, do you remember this? And I just threw it on the bed. Chucked it on the bed, and it landed in the back corner. She was here, I was there, okay? And then all of a sudden, bear in mind this was like daytime, right? All of a sudden we started like feeling a bit freaked out, and we were hearing like knocking noises. It sounds wild. And I remember I was like froze, right? And I was like, I don't know, I was scared, right? And I texted my mum and I was like, can you come upstairs? I know it sounds weird, but we were both like, oh my God, this is scary. And then all of a sudden, oh, I hate this. All of a sudden, next to where she was sat, right, so this is my bed, right, so she's sat here. Next to where she was sat, my duvet did that and just lifted up. And I went, oh my God, did you just see that? And as she turned her head and looked, the duvet did this, went like something was grabbing like this. And it was going towards the box where we had the makeshift Ouija board in, and literally went across to the box. We got up and we ran downstairs to my mum. We were hysterically screaming. She came upstairs and she grabbed the box, told us off, and that was the end of that, right? I did not dabble with a board for like a long time after that, until I started working with some spiritualists who actually do it for spiritual guidance, talking to spirit guides and whatnot. But that's another video. That's another topic to talk about. And and not long after that, we then moved house again. I know, shocker, we just kept moving. So this next house, my mom and stepdad still live there now, and they definitely do have some paranormal things happening in this house. There's definitely like a nosy man that is on the landing. He's very like judgy, like, what are you doing? It's the only way I can explain it. But their dog, George, some of you have seen, he cannot sleep or be upstairs because he gets terrified. So as soon as George goes upstairs, he cries, he stares, and he gets like, he shakes of fear. Like, it's so weird. But anyway, they're looking to move again soon. But I then moved out by myself to a little house which was 300 years old. I loved this house. It was where I lived before I moved here with Jordan. And that house, believe it or not, was haunted. So I loved it though. Like, I got on great with the spirits. But there was this woman that used to walk through the kitchen in a long white dress. And every now and again, you'd just see the corner of your eye, this woman just walking across. Like, it was so weird. My neighbour, like, the houses were all joined. They used to say that things in their house would just like disappear. And then I started having it as well. And I remember this one day, I was making pasta, right? And I went into my cupboard to get my colander out because I was like, I need my colander, right? And it was gone. And I was like, what the effing Jeff now? So I looked in all, it was a tiny house, it was tiny. I looked in all the cupboards, wasn't there? I looked on top of the cupboards, I looked in the oven, I looked all over the house, right? This metal colander, about this big, it was gone. Nowhere to be seen, right? And I was like, where is my colander? And I remember standing in the kitchen, I was like, right, if you've took my colander, I was like, please just bring it back when you can. I was like, because I need it, because I like pasta, so please just bring it back. Anyway, like a week later, it appeared again in the cupboard. Like, how do you explain that? It was the wildest thing. And there was also a spirit in this house who I got to know, and he was called William, right? And I got on with William. He had no issues with me, but anyone else that came to my house, he didn't like them. He was protective of the house, and for some reason, William was very protective of me as well, right? So I had a ex-boyfriend at the time, and he couldn't sleep. He used to say he felt like someone was peering and watching over him, and he used to get freaked out in the house. My friend Jess, who some of you have seen on the main channel, she used to come and stay in the spare room. She used to have to sleep with the night light on because she felt like someone was watching her, and someone used to turn off the night light, which was a flicky switch as well. And one time, I shouldn't laugh because she was scared. Hello, Otto. She used to go and sleep downstairs on the sofa, didn't she, Otto? Because she was so frightened. And she could sleep down there, she just couldn't sleep upstairs. And this one time, she said that some shoes got flung at her. Not on there. She said some shoes got flung at her from the wardrobe, and she felt like something over all the time, and I think she even heard someone breathing in her ear as well. Really weird. And I never told people the story when they stayed because I didn't want to scare them, but even my sister like felt like something was there watching her. When I moved, my mum come to help clear the house out. She was freaked out in the house by herself, and it was just a really weird house, right? But then I noticed that when people came, if they said, right, I don't mean you any harm, I don't mean the house any harm, like I'm friends with Lottie, I mean you no harm, whatever, all peace and love, then William would leave them alone and he was chill. So like you just had to be like respectful to him and he was fine. But like when I left, I was like, oh William, I was like, thanks for looking after me, like I'm going now, like bye. And he was lovely, but he was definitely a protective spirit. And this was a really wild thing that happened in this house. So I had kicked my ex out because he was a, we won't go there, but anyway, kicked him out. And I remember I sat there one day on the sofa and all of a sudden, right, it sounds bizarre, I had this like little bookcase thing, and under there the rabbits live there, and I lived like by myself, just me, the cats and the rabbits, and this book come off the shelf, right, and landed in the middle of the room. And this book is like a witchy book all about like how to protect your home and stuff like that. And I was just like shook. I was like, how did that just come off there? Didn't knock any crystals off the shelf or nothing. It was a thick book. Mist didn't land on the rabbits. It like did this and landed on the rug, right? And it was on this page about how to clear your home of negative energy. And I was like, that is so funny. Because I just kicked this guy out and I was like, that is William or someone watching over me. I thought it was the best and brilliant thing ever. And there was another really funny thing that happened in that house. So Jess, again, same person, she came to stay and had this small little like table and chairs in the living room because it was a tiny little house. And we were having some drinks, right? And all of a sudden, Jess felt someone put like their full hand on her thigh, right? And she was like, what the hell was that? And she jumped up, and we were a bit tiddly, as I said, right? And then I was like, oh, don't worry. She was like, oh my God, I bet it's William, whatever again. I was like, it's fine. I was like, I'll get the sage and I'll cleanse the house. And I was walking, like about to go upstairs to cleanse the house. And all of a sudden there was this massive bang in the corner of the living room, and we both screamed, started running, but Jess like ran at me, barged me out of the way. I had the burning sage in my hand. I like fell, burnt her on her leg, and we both were like on the kitchen floor like half hysterically laughing and half scared for our lives. And that was another funny thing, but I think that was just a ghost, like I think it was just William having a prank. But we did then cleanse the house, and that was really, really funny. And that was the last thing in that house. But I then moved in with Jordan, where I am now. This house is not haunted. We have had a few weird things happen here. Like, I was sat getting ready one day, and I had like a fake plant, and all the leaves just randomly bent down, and then my makeup box fell on the floor, and me and Jordan both saw it. And we were like, that was weird. But I think it's just like relatives come to visit. It's not like haunted, it's just visitors. And weirdly, actually yesterday, so we've got a Henry Hoover, and you know the Hoover bit clips into the back, like it stands up and clicks, right? So it was clicked in, and then randomly yesterday it just like moved by itself and just fell on the floor. Like it unclipped itself and just went on the floor. It was really weird. No animals around, so we have stuff happen here, but nothing like I've had in my past. But you know what? I know it sounds terrifying, and as I said, it definitely could be a horror film, but it's character building, you know. And I learnt the hard way not to like dabble and how important it is to protect yourself. So now that's why I bang on so much about how important it is to protect yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like it's so important. But it's been a wild journey, and I don't think I'd be where I am today on the main channel doing paranormal investigations if it wasn't for all of that wild stuff. But what I want to know is, if you have lived in a haunted house, I want to know your stories. I want you to comment them down below, because I find it so fascinating that the majority of people have had some sort of weird experience in their life. But that is all of my haunted house stories. I know it's wild, but hand on heart, it happened. Wild times. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And I hope you have a good day or a good night, whatever it is when you watch this video. Bye!